your own alignment to your own value system, what's right, what's wrong for you, how well that you keep those boundaries, you stay in a consistent, congruent expression of those, builds up a certain level of strength and character inside of you. What creates a sustainable long-term relationship is not like how cute you are or how much money you make. It's none of that. It is about the quality of your character.
Any successful relationship starts with finding your center, the truth at the core of who you are. Only then can you develop the ability to truly connect with someone else. Concentric is about aligning with people who share a common center. This show gives you the tools and the skills to do just that through practical training, real life stories and examples, and in-depth interviews with people who have taken this journey and come out the other side better for it. Welcome to Concentric. We're glad you're here. Welcome to episode number 2 of Concentric. Today we're talking about the most important relationship that you can have, be great at, develop, which is the relationship with yourself. I think the vast majority of people fall into one of two camps. One is the eye roll when they hear something like that, like, oh boy, yeah, get in touch, touchy-feely, blah, blah, blah. Or the people who get it, understand it, agree with it. Yeah, you should do that, but how do you do that? Gary and I dive into that deep today. Gary gives you some amazing tools and some resources to get that ball rolling. Really powerful stuff. And that's why I wanted to dig into it early on in this show, in this series, because it's foundational, to everything else that we're going to go through and talk about and developing those relationships with anybody. So hope you enjoy. Let's jump in. Gary, how is it going?
It's going great. I've been traveling a bit, so it's good to be back in the saddle. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Me too. This is so much fun. I really wanted to pick up where we left off from episode 1. And you made this point. We kind of got into the fact that when it comes to relationships, if you don't have the relationship with yourself figured out, like that's, nothing else is going to ever quite work out long term, I think. Talk to me a little bit about this concept and what you've seen working with so many people, both when they've finally gotten this right, and when you walk in and you see, hey, that's the symptom. That's the problem right there, is they're not right with that.
It is such an enormous topic. And I'm going to make it my answer to that inquiry is going to be a bit personal, because I spent a lot of time in my earlier years being pretty dysfunctional in relationships and suffering quite a bit, and wondering what the heck was wrong. Was I just not picking the right person? I would have these serial relationships that would last, 2 months, 8 months, a year, but never anything that I could actually create a prolonged, committed, deep dive relationship with. And I began to understand that the common denominator was well and truly me. I would have a different partner, but I would feel the same over a period of time. And I kept thinking, it can't be outside of me. It has to be what's happening inside of me. And I realized through the course when I was younger that a relationship was very much like a mirror. It showed me things about myself that either I was in denial of, or things I didn't even know existed that I was doing, but was reflected back to me through generally my partner's either frustration, anger, or just complete impatience with. And I'm like, but I'm not doing that. I don't feel that. I could not see it until I did. And what I began to understand early on was that my relationship with myself, first of all, the most important thing was I able to keep my word, which is the foundation of your relationship with yourself, your own congruency, your own alignment to your own value system, what's right, what's wrong for you, how well that you you keep those boundaries, you stay in a consistent, congruent expression of those, builds up a certain level of strength and character inside of you. What creates a sustainable long-term relationship is not like how cute you are or how great of sex you are or even how much money you make. It's none of that. It is about the quality of your character. Can you be that person that someone can depend on, that can trust? Do you have humanity? Do you have compassion? Do you have a sense of the ability to engender trust in others because you are so consistent and so congruent, and what you say you're going to do, you do? And this is what it kind of began to boil down to for me, is that I was not in a great relationship with self. I had not done the deeper work that allowed me to release my old traumas, that allowed me to start really challenging what some of the limiting beliefs were that I was seeing my world through. And I didn't even know about what my values were, because values are deeply unconscious. And until you do a contrastive analysis process, which eventually at some point we're going to do live with someone, until you know those, because top 5 values drive your behavior. If you're misaligned to that, you tend to have a really deep, dark relationship with little corners of yourself. It may not be so pronounced, but with little corners of yourself. And this becomes a place where we absolutely require to make a breakthrough. I was just working with a couple, and the wife actually had this propensity, I'm not even saying propensity, but addiction to alcohol that was really, really becoming worse and worse and worse. What emerged out of that was that there was almost an addiction to pornography. So pornography caused shame. Shame drives alcoholism, because all addiction is driven by shame. So there was this whole thing kind of intermixed. And this was years ago. I was working with this couple. And what began to emerge out of our coaching, because when I do couples coaching, I will see the couple together. Then I often do, because of this very topic. If you don't have your individual shit together, you can't possibly have your relationship stuff together. So work with the couples individually to help them heal this stuff. But what emerged in one of the sessions with her was she, and unbeknownst to her, she had no idea, but she had an experience during a process piece that I was doing with her, that she was molested when she was like 4, 5, 6, something like that, by an uncle. And she had no idea that had ever happened. And then she realized that she had been sexualized so young that it sort of twisted her view between love and sex and intimacy and the ability to connect. But she had no clue. All she knew was that pornography was something that gave her a rush that she felt comfortable with, but she disconnected from her partner when she was lost in that. Therefore, she couldn't connect intimately. She couldn't connect love and sex together. So all this began to become quite evident in our coaching sessions together. And by the time we were done, she had been able to break through the trauma of that, begin to heal what had happened to her. And then they were able to create an environment together as a couple where she could finally experience love and sexuality and commitment all mixed into one experience, which was, once she actually was able to experience that, nothing else could take its place for her. And you never give up something unless you have something better to take its place. And once she discovered that, all the rest of the behaviors that were sabotaging the relationship just began to drop away. The bottom line is, until the relationship with self, until that deeper work with self can happen, you can't unravel this mystery of why you feel and act and do what you do, because 90% of us is unconscious. And if some of these things are running us at an unconscious level, that is what we bring into the context or the culture of our relationship. This is why I'm always saying self-leadership before thinking that a real relationship and that the potential for a successful relationship can be achieved.
Yeah, and I'm glad you clarified some of this too, because it's certainly not uncommon for us to hear these days. Like, you got to love yourself first. You have to get right with yourself first. You know, but that's just like you're started with. Like, that's a giant topic.
It's a bit vague too, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's like, what does that mean, right?
Right.
And I like that you went down the path of values. You touched on two major areas here. One is, okay, how do I quantify this? Getting right with myself, understanding myself, and I think that value statement. And we do. We'll have a 3-part series coming up really soon to kind of dig in this with values.
Good.
And so quantifying that, so just to understand what you even want in this world, what you expect of yourself in this world. It's huge. That's a big part of it. And then the second pillar there is, why am I acting this way? Whether it's relationship, business, walking down the street, like, what is this?
One of the things I think is really important to clarify, this is not, and I'll repeat, it is not talk therapy that I'm talking about. Those are not the tools that are used in Concentric or any of the work I've ever done for the last 40 years. It isn't. It really, all the work is based on really the science of human excellence. It's how do we make quick term and deep, profound changes in the shortest period of time. And I think I shared with you, and you know this, and eventually we'll do a demo on it, but the memory resolution technique that I created years ago decodes your nervous system in anywhere from 10 minutes to 15 minutes, sometimes as short as 5 minutes, from just about any trauma. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. I tack on another process for some traumas that just are particularly, adherent and adhesive, that they don't want to let go. But the bottom line is, we always get it, and we can do it content free. And that's the biggest, kind of joy of it. Like, people can
What does that mean?
That means that someone can come and sit down like, okay, there's a trauma that is troubling you, that is haunting you from your past. You know what it is? They go, yes. I go, great. I don't need to know any information about it. All I need to know is that you've identified it. So all I need is this information, like, okay, 5 years old in the backyard, 16 in the parking lot, 22 at study hall. Whatever that's all I need. And then we can go in, as long as you know what the memory is that we need to work on. Then we can actually neutralize that. I was working with a fellow the other day, and there was this really deep and big memory that was pretty haunting for him. When he would think about it, he would cry. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's work on that, because that particular memory was about him doing something poorly to someone else, and he had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt around it. And it isn't that you don't make amends. It's that you don't carry around the wound. Sometimes people feel like, I have to carry around the pain in order to never do it again. But it's like going to a stove and burning your hand as a kid and go, oh, gee, that really hurt. Oh, gee, I'm going to forget that I was in so much pain when I burnt my hand on the stove. Oh, well, I'm a grown adult now. I'm going to go back and re-burn my hand to make sure I remember the lesson. You don't have to continue to aggravate the suffering to retain the wisdom. You can retain the wisdom without the pain, because out of all those emotions are born all of these different ways that people punish themselves, especially when they're carrying around unmitigated guilt. So this process actually decodes the nervous system in a very short period of time, so that the memory, you always have the memory, but the memory appears like a black and white photo in a photo album. You know what happened, but it no longer has that emotional punch.
It's data now
instead of data, this. Because all of our behaviors are actually emotionally driven. So we have to look at that. If we continue to do behaviors that do not support us, it's because at some level we're carrying around some sort of limiting belief, some sort of sense of we're not good enough, some sort of sense of I don't even like myself. You'd be amazed at how many people don't like themselves. Or they're carrying around guilt and feel like they deserve to suffer. And those are the type of strategies that people will have. Well, they use it almost at an unconscious level that really blocks any kind of success, either professionally or personally. So it becomes this really important place that we have to take a good, solid look at. We're here for a reason. We're here to do something that no one else can do. We're here to touch and speak to and be a positive influence in people's lives around us. We're here to be actualized. We're not here to suffer, feel guilt, feel bad, be unactualized, and continue a life of mediocrity. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. And in order for us to wake up to that, we have to do the work to unravel what we created, oftentimes by the intelligence, life experience, and intellect of a small child. Right. So these are the things that actually begin to surface. And when they surface, then we have effective tools to transform them. What most people do is like, I don't even want to look at all that back there. Because if I look at all that back there and I'm just going to talk about it, or I'm not going to have effective resolution, it's going to just mess me up. Because I have a compartment right now. It's all hidden away and it's all good. I'm not dealing with it all the time. But what will happen is it'll surface in generally a one-on-one relationship. So when people can get that there is a way out, and it's fast and it's thorough and it's permanent, that's when they'll go, okay, I have the courage to look at it. And that's where we make progress.
And I think that's such an important distinction, because I understand that feeling. I understand that feeling of, if I open that box, it's all coming out, and I don't want it. It's best I don't open that box, right?
Yeah.
I understand that feeling completely. And then even when they do see, again, the talk therapy example, I think in a lot of ways, I think there's a reason for talk therapy. I think there's progress can be made, and rather than not do anything, of course, right? Like getting help and getting guidance and figuring out that. But in some ways, keeping the box closed is almost better than going and talking about this stuff for 3 years, right? Because you're bringing it alive, you're making it real without the resolution part. You're just talking about it. And then it's just your body, you're at a cellular level, doesn't know the difference between when it happened and you keeping it alive. So all that negative. So it's almost better to keep it in than talk about it for years and years. But what's way better than all of it, of course, is to go through this process that you're talking about, and find actual resolution to it. So what happens how do you go about that process if you don't know what it is? Like, you genuinely, like, I don't have any idea why I react this way. For me, like, I've got a thing around food, right? Like I've had forever, and I didn't discover it till I was 20 something years old, like this insane emotional reaction of somebody getting food and I didn't have any, like, just, I mean, inside that nobody would have known, but inside, oh my gosh, like, I'm just devastated. And it was the first time I was like, what in the world? Why am I? Because I have no memory of ever being hungry, ever going without, ever, and so that might be something, it's not affecting me day to day, but that in that instance, what part of that process, or is it a completely separate process that allows you to discover what that is?
That's a great question, because, quite frankly, 90% of us rest at the unconscious. And so the unconscious mind has a few prime directives. And one of those prime directives is that it keeps issues suppressed until you have the resources in which to effectively deal with them. So when you start learning how to effectively deal with them, something will percolate up from the unconscious, and you will have then the tool to be able to actually neutralize that particular issue. Now, that issue that you just spoke of feels like it doesn't have anything to do with what has occurred to you in this life, and has no necessarily thread back to a particular key significant event that you can remember. So, based upon your belief system. Now, for me, it's like, some people believe in past lives, some people don't. It doesn't matter to me, because for all I know, what people experience when they're having what I would call a past life experience, it could be the way the subconscious mind metaphorically represents that, because the subconscious mind speaks in metaphor. Symbology is its language. So it does the whole conversation about past life or not a past life, it's sort of a moot point, because we don't know. But what we do know is that when we create the change work in a deeper state, a more focused state, then what will happen is that person feels differently. They experience a different response from what used to trigger them to what no longer triggers them. And that is what we are desiring, the end result. Regardless of how you frame it, it's the end result. So let's say you and I got together for a session and we did a regression. I have no idea whether you're regressing back to actually a past life experience or whether you're regressing back to a point in time that your subconscious mind metaphorically represents something around scarcity of food. Doesn't matter. All that matters is that we do the change work around whatever comes up as the root cause to that. And once we do the change work and change the internal representation around whatever that event was, and you start to feel differently, when you feel differently, it starts to show up different in your behavior, in your visceral emotional response. That is what we're after. So the whole process is we have to understand that human beings are very complicated. We are very multidimensional. We have a very broad depth to us, and we have an infinite capacity to create our reality, either negatively or positively. When you ask someone, well, I've gotten up in multiple conferences, and the first thing I'll ask people is, how do you know that you're you? And they'll all ponder this big question. I'm like, no, seriously. If I had you isolated in a flotation tank, you're there for 3 months, all the food you'd ever want through a feeding tube, all of the perfect temperature, perfect, beverages of choice, all of it. If you were there for 3 months, had no external stimulus, how would you know you were you? Eventually in the audience, someone would say, well, it's your memories. And I'd be like, that's exactly right. And then I'll say, okay, everybody get a memory. Everybody gets a memory, and I'll go, were you seeing a picture? Did you have any associated sounds? Were you getting a feeling as you contemplated that image that represents that memory? And they all go, yes, I get an image. Sometimes I have associated sound, sometimes, but it always produces some kind of an emotional state. I go, great. So then your entire past is nothing but a collection of pictures, sounds, and feelings linked together with certain emotional states. And they go, yes, that's how it is. So the past is no longer here. It's only here in a series of pictures, sounds, and feelings. So if we can actually create a different response to those pictures, sounds, and the feelings change, then we've actually changed personal history. If we can resource those experiences, then we will change personal history. When we change personal history, our references of how we see the world and respond to the world, if we're no longer responding to the world through a collection of unresolved negative emotions, distorted internal representations and sounds, and we have changed those feelings, those pictures, and those sounds to be something far more resourceful, then we respond differently. What happens is that people don't know how the subconscious mind works. And until we learn how to actually shift the picture, sounds, and feelings of our past, neutralize those emotional states, shift the meaning, align that all to our values and our predetermined from our values mission in the world, we back all that up, we become an unstoppable force for achieving what we came here to achieve. And until we do that, will flounder, and we won't necessarily have all of us online. We'll only have portions of us online. And in my perspective, we're meant to be here and be as fully potentialized as we possibly can. And in order for that to happen, one of us, some of us, have to stand on the trials and tribulations and the triumphs of our ancestors that came before us, because those were the ones that imprinted us, and be the one that holds up the light and actually does it differently. Otherwise, the sins of the father are visited upon the sons and the daughters for generation upon generation upon generation, until someone wakes up in the generational downline and goes, I'm going to be the one that's going to break this pattern. I'm going to be the one that's going to stop this manifestation of these dysfunctions that's been handed down for generations. I'm not going to hand this down to my kids. I'm going to do it differently. And that requires deep, profound internal work. When people do that, everything changes.
Absolutely. That's huge. And I want to wrap this, because I think that's exactly what I want to dig into in an episode of in and of itself, is being that light for others. I've heard you mention before, and I love that phrase and that idea. And that's its own challenge and goal, and quest in your life to do that. That's so meaningful. But before we leave this too, for those who are, I'm in, like, I want to do this, or I want to figure this out, and they're sitting at home, wherever they are, what can they do? I want to get right with myself. I want to heal this stuff. What can they do?
Well, I finished that online event, that online training called Creating Incredible Relationships. It was a passion project for me, quite frankly, because what I wanted to do was, I just kind of sat in my office and filmed night after night after night after night, because I wanted to put together in short videos how to work with yourself, how to work with your partner, how to have conversation, how to solve problems together, how to be collaborative, how to get more emotionally resourceful, and very specific tools on how to begin to start understanding another person more effectively. When I got done with it, I was like, this was really good stuff that I've been talking about for about 35 years. And now I finally captured it, which was a bit of an accomplishment for me. And then I want to be able to put together at least once a month, perhaps twice a month, a webinar where people can call in questions, and week after application. It would only be for those people who actually are going through the training, and then be able to answer questions and be able to do some group coaching together. All that is what I think it's the only way I could figure out how to reach lots and lots of people, and not burn myself out completely. And
right.
this is the one way that I could do it. So if people are really interested, then you need to check out Creating Incredible Relationships. It's going to be on multiple platforms, and you can at some point put all that information up, and then we can meet. We can meet and on the webinars and be able to answer questions and go through some processes together and create a community of people who are literally committed to self-actualization and doing it in the context of their relationships. Because I can be all enlightened on a mountaintop sitting in a cave and meditating, which in fact I would love to be able to do, just hang out and do nothing but that. But we're in relationships. And what I find is I can be really, really this kind of sadhu-like guy alone. But in a relationship, it's way different, because we're being mirrored back every moment, our actions and our reactions in the mirror of another. That, to reach that level of awakening in the context of a relationship, for me, that is the ultimate goal.
That's so powerful. The course is incredible, and we're certainly going to link up all of that. And that's been, when you created that too, that was a big reason I was like, we've got to do this show, right? I want to get more people awareness of all of this. And then especially now that there's a place I can send them, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
this thing. And they're like, okay, cool. What do I do about it? And I'm like, now I can go here,
Well, Jason, we require, and I truly believe this, we require this time in history on the planet more resources than we have ever had. There is so much occurring in global health, in global politics, in the culture wars. All of that is all occurring. Our children are growing up in this mess of uncertainty. And I will say, unlike any other generation, we haven't yet seen the ramifications that this is going to have on our kids. So the more resource we can be, because our kids are going to model us if we're freaking out, if we have all these stress factors that we cannot handle. What do you think our kids are going to do? So the bottom line is we require to become rock solid in how we actually view our lives and grow to the point to where we are this infinite power for good. And we're demonstrating that in word, thought, and action to the best of our ability. So our children see it's possible, number one. Number two, they have something great to model. And in modeling our own individual, I'll say, coming online, they'll see that it's possible for them as well.
We use this term relationships and stuff. Yes, there's spouse, romantic relationship, but we're talking relationships with our kids, relationships with our coworkers, relationships with people walking down the street. I mean, these are powerful tools to help us in every aspect. Another great topic to dig into, and like always in many of our conversations, we could talk another 3 hours on this topic.
I know.
I love getting your insights on it, but also it's so important. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode early on, is to not just reinforce that idea that you need to get right with yourself for moving through this world, but also how, and some of those tools to do so.
And I think that we will start going, once we get more of the general information out, then we'll start going more specifically on how we can begin to start utilizing some of these tools.
Absolutely.
So I'm super excited. And I'm really excited to do another episode on this topic, but how it pertains to business and building high-performing teams.
We'll do it. All right.
Okay,
thanks so much, Gary.
Absolutely.
We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Concentric. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd certainly like a great review from you on your favorite podcasting platform. But more than that, what really makes a difference to a show like ours is a recommendation to someone who would love this show like you do. Word of mouth referrals to your network and your podcast devouring friends is incredibly helpful to the growth of this show. For episode links and info, go to concentricshow.com. Thank you so much, and remember to keep building alignment to build a better life.